Tuesday, November 17th, 2020. I hereby call this meeting of the City of Vacaville Planning Commission to order. Before we do a roll call, I have a script that I'd like to read regarding tonight's meeting. Good evening, and we appreciate everyone who's participating in tonight's meeting, which is done by teleconference and Zoom. We're doing it pursuant to the Governor's Executive Order N-29-20. We ask you bear with us. We make sure that we use the remote tools properly. There may be times when there are moments of silence or other things as we're waiting to make sure that everyone who is online has a chance to participate while we're using the remote tools. The Planning Commission meeting can be viewed live on the city's website, which is cityofvacaville.com, or you can watch it on cable channel 26. Instructions to participate from a computer are provided on the website, which is cityofvacaville.com. You may connect via the link listed on the agenda for tonight's meeting. If you're following along with a telephone and you're prompted for a participant ID, press the pound sign to be connected to the meeting. If you wish to participate, you'll need to follow along on the telephone or computer, not on channel 26, because there's a broadcast delay on channel 26. Callers who wish to comment can raise their hand by pressing *9. Depending upon the individual settings you have on your phone, you may need to press *6 after you are unmuted by the host in order to open your own microphone. And computer users who are requesting to speak can click the raise hand button in their Zoom controls. That completes the introductory comments, and I will ask the secretary to call the roll.
Good evening, Planning Commissioners. Chair McCauley.
Here.
Vice Chair Fortney.
Here.
Commissioners Aldridge.
Here.
Beaumont.
Here.
Alan Johnson.
Here.
Brett Johnson.
Here.
Commissioner Lightfoot.
Here.
Chair, we have a quorum.
Thank you. If you would all rise, face the nearest flag, and please join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Item number 3 on the agenda is communication. An introduction of written correspondence received prior to the meeting. Mr. Baderi, do we have any correspondence?
Yes, we do have one item that was forwarded to the Planning Commission today, and that is an information graphic describing the city's fast-track biotechnology approval process, and that will be covered in the presentation on that item this evening.
Great. Thank you very much, Mr. Baderi. Item number 4 is approval of the agenda. Do any commissioners wish to make changes to the agenda?
Chair Beaumont will move to approve.
Okay, Commissioner Beaumont has moved to approve. Do I have a second?
Second.
Commissioner Aldridge has seconded. Secretary, please call the roll for approval of the agenda.
Commissioner Aldridge.
Yes.
Beaumont.
Yes.
Alan Johnson.
Aye.
Brett Johnson.
Yes.
Commissioner Lightfoot.
Aye.
Vice Chair Fortney.
Yes.
Chair McCauley.
Yes. So the agenda is approved as proposed. Item number 5 is business from the floor. This is a time to address the commission with issues that are not on the agenda for tonight, but that are within the commission's subject matter jurisdiction. We ask presenters to limit themselves to a maximum of 3 minutes per person or group of speakers. That's consistent with both the government code and the Vacaville municipal code. Is there anyone online who is asking to bring anything business from the floor? So hearing none and seeing nothing show up on the Zoom screen, I will see we have no business from the floor and close item number 5. Item number 6 is the consent calendar. The only item on the consent calendar is approval of the minutes from our October 20th, 2020 meeting. Do any commissioners wish to propose amendments or corrections to those minutes? Hearing none, I'll ask for a motion to approve the consent calendar.
Move approved.
So moved.
First was by Commissioner Aldridge, and I didn't recognize the voice for the second.
Johnson.
Okay, Commissioner Alan Johnson, we have a motion second. All those in favor, will the secretary please call the roll?
Commissioners Aldridge,
Yes.
Beaumont,
I abstain. I wasn't there.
Alan Johnson,
Aye.
Brett Johnson,
Yes.
Commissioner Lightfoot,
Aye.
Vice Chair Fortney,
Yeah.
Chair McCauley.
Yes. So 6-0-1 vote to approve the consent calendar. We now move on to item number 7, public hearings. 7A is the Villages at Abandoned Meadows Development Agreement Amendment. And it looks like our staff contact is Mr. Eno. Would staff go ahead and make their presentation?
Thank you, Chair and members of the Planning Commission. This item before you tonight is the Villages at Abandoned Meadows Development Agreement Amendment. And specifically, this request includes an extension to the term of this agreement. Currently, it's set at 10 years, and they're looking to change that to 20 years. There's also some other minor changes to the text, mainly clarification changes to text that was originally included. I found it appropriate to probably provide the commission with some information about the project itself. The Villages was originally approved in 2013. It consists of 463 units on approximately 97 acres. And there's 3 villages that are broken up into this portion of Abandoned Meadows. There's Village G with 97 units, and that particular development portion consists of clusters or courtyard type of development. There's Village 8, which are your smaller lots. There's 209 units there. And then your larger lots in Village I, there's 157 units there. For that approval that it was given in 2013, that DA is set to expire in 2023. And the developer is being proactive about this and looking to just extend it to give them more time to work through the necessary improvements and plans that need to be prepared for this project. As summarized in my staff report and the findings, staff has reviewed this request and we support it because it meets the findings for extending the development agreement request and for development agreement amendments. It complies with the municipal code. And then most importantly, there aren't any changes to the obligations that were originally outlined in the development agreement. So with that, our recommendation for the commission is that by simple motion, the Planning Commission would recommend to the City Council to reaffirm the Abandoned Meadows Environmental Impact Report that was originally adopted for this project, and then also that the City Council adopt the Villages at Abandoned Meadows Development Agreement Amendment. That's all I have for the presentation. Short and sweet. I'm here to answer any questions, as well as the applicant's attorney, and then also the civil engineer for the project.
Thank you, Mr. Eno. Are there any of the members of the commission who have questions for staff at this time?
Albert, go ahead.
Go ahead, Doug.
Commissioner Beaumont, I do have a couple quick questions. On the bottom of page 3 of your report, it shows the minor textual changes to improve existing language, clarify the total number of residential units, and it says the proposed amendment is included as attachment 3, but I looked through this thing and I couldn't find attachment 3. Is it in there?
The attachment 3 should be the first amendment to the development agreement. I apologize for that. I think that there was administrative error in putting the label for attachment 3 on that, but it should be titled for attachment 3, first amendment to the development agreement.
Okay, so it's there, but just mislabeled. The next question on the next page on the top on page 4, it says we can take 3 actions, and one is to approve the amendment, 2 is to approve the amendment with modifications, and 3 is to deny the amendment. So with those minor changes and the lots changing, Is that included in that attachment 3, or should we be approving the amendment with modifications?
Well, the amendments request stands as such with, it includes the extension for the additional 10 years, but also the minor textual changes. The outline of what the commission's ability to act on this project includes, you can act on the request that's in front of you, or you can review the request and decide to modify the request. That's within the commission's ability to act on this item tonight. So it'd be a separate modification.
Okay, great. Thanks, Albert.
And for members of the commission, the screen that I'm working on does not move request to speak up to the very top, so I'll just keep going back and forth. It looks like Vice Chair Fortney wishes to speak because you're shown as unmuted here.
No, I don't have a question. I'm using my phone, so.
Okay, I won't keep coming back to you unless you ask.
I'll raise my hand.
Any other commissioners?
Brett Johnson here. I have a few questions and comments.
Okay, go ahead, Brent, and then after that, Commissioner Lightfoot has indicated ask questions. So go ahead, Mr. Johnson.
Albert, finding number 2 of the proposed ordinance says, whereas due to market conditions, the developers under the development agreement desire an additional period of time to implement the Bandon Meadows specific plan and development project. Being that market conditions is a subjective term, can you elaborate staff perspective as to what market conditions exist that would prevent currently the developer from developing the project as previously approved, and what over the past 7 years has occurred in the market that has prevented them from moving forward? That's my first question and comment.
Thank you for that question. I think that would probably be best articulated by Mr. Sebring, that's here also in the attendees. I would defer to him to provide an explanation. Also, Mr. Felipe, who best know their project and the things that really help them better understand what drives their intent to move forward with the project.
Commissioner Johnson, if it's okay with you, we'll hold off before we have the applicant address that. I want to see what Commissioner Lightfoot's question or comment is, and then we'll ask the developer and his engineer to address that from the floor. Is that okay with you?
Sure, and at that point, I'll add some additional questions.
Okay, then we'll keep in mind on that. Mr. Lightfoot, you have your hand raised.
Yes, I'm looking through the 2013 approval application, and in there was a schedule requirement, and I was wondering if that's being amended and if a new schedule is being presented as well. And so it's along the lines of the last question.
We have not received a revised schedule for this, including with this development agreement amendment, but I think that the developer could elaborate as to whether or not there will be any schedule changes for the project.
So if there aren't other commissioner questions, it seems like it's timely to go to the opening of the public hearing and ask the applicant to make any initial comments they have, including addressing the questions they've heard before. For a member of the public who may be watching, during the public hearing, any member of the public may ask questions or raise issues. We always give the applicant the chance to make the initial presentation. So with that being said, I would like to go ahead and Nancy, I believe you're controlling the board, so you can make sure that the applicant and the applicant's engineer have the chance to make this initial presentation. Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, this is Tom Filippi. Can I see if I can address Commissioner Johnson's questions?
Yes, Mr. Filippi, please proceed.
Okay, so the big issue is what has happened over the last 7 years and why market conditions have necessitated this extension. If you were to look at your packet in Figure 1, the proximity map, you'll see in the lower left-hand corner the project that's in kind of a grayish tone. That's called the Estates at Bandon Meadows, and which actually was approved at the same time as the Villages at Bandon Meadows. One of the requirements that both projects had, thank you, Albert, for putting that on the board. In the lower left-hand corner, you see Jackson Road and the realigned Bandon. This project, the Villages at Bandon Meadows, had the requirement to realign Bandon and Foxborough Parkway, or whichever project happened to go first. So it was a little bit of the proverbial catch-22 as to how and who would develop first and those kinds of things. There was more immediate interest in the estates at Bandon Meadows, so they went first and built the realigned Bandon Road. As you can see, it curves now and then hits Foxborough and then heads east to the intersection of Bandon and Leisure Town Road. And quite candidly, our project had that same requirement, and so I think part of the issue was, a little bit of waiting till those improvements were done, so that when we started to market the Villages at Bandon Meadows, that very onerous off-site requirement, which was an on-site requirement for the Estates project, wouldn't be an issue anymore. So that was certainly one of the big driving factors. Now, the other driving factor is the fact that, these kinds of projects require a lot of time and effort to go through the improvement plan process, go through cyclical economic conditions where builders are interested in projects, then not interested in projects, and that process. So over the last several years, most of the effort in that area has focused on the Estates project. And now we're able, because those improvements are done, we are able to move forward unimpeded by that requirement. And we're at a point now, we're at year 7 in a 10-year agreement. And it's just not enough time to be able to, if we started construction literally next summer, and we have improvement plans and maps in a position where we could do that, to be able to build out the project and sell the homes in a 3-year time frame just would not be enough time. So that's a lot of the reason for the request.
And if you have other questions, go ahead.
Sure, Tom. I one question that just kind of popped up. What is the status of the final map and improvement plans, and are you phasing those?
They are phased. We have the improvement plans for each of the areas. We have not done the improvement plans on the cluster units as of yet. We're working with different, potential builders, and there's different phasing options that we're looking at right now, which, Brett, I really can't share right now, but we are going to phase it. And those decisions will hopefully be made in the next few weeks or months.
Thank you. Given the time that this was approved in 2013, is this project subject to a CFD 12?
It's CFD 11, and the answer is yes.
Okay, 11, sorry. 11 is for new development, 12 is for infill.
Yeah, correct.
Okay, thank you. One of the other issues that I have with extending this development agreement is the EIR and reaffirming the EIR. And here's one of the main issues is that in November of 2016, the Roberts Ranch specific plan was approved, and that project required an annexation into the city. So ostensibly in 2013, when this project EIR the specific plan EIR was approved, it did not include the 785 lots that were to be added and annexed into the city limits through the Roberts Ranch project. So I think it's a little challenging to say that now the project would have the same impacts when developed that it would then as it would now, because we've now added so many more lots that were not previously considered at the time of this approval. And so I don't know from a city standpoint what we can do as part of our approval to move forward to extend these. I would lean towards maybe an updated focused EIR to study the impacts now as it's associated with the new projects that have been delivered that were not previously included in this EIR study. Or something along those lines. So, and maybe Christian can chime in and give his thoughts on that matter.
This is Christian Cyprian, the applicant's land use counsel, and good evening, commissioners. I'd like to point out just two things on the CEQA side. One is that the physical changes to the environment caused by this project, there are no changes, and so obviously the EIR analyzed those direct physical impacts. And you raised concerns, it sounds like primarily about, well, there are other projects that may not have been contemplated in that EIR that are now in existence, such as Roberts Ranch. But the city did undertake a wide look at all cumulative projects when it did its general plan update EIR, which included analyzing the development potential of those areas to be annexed into the city. So the city as a whole has reviewed both this project and all pipeline projects that are consistent with that general plan update. And Roberts Ranch was included in that update.
Staff, I'd like to go ahead and have you contribute to this at this time, please, on the CEQA issue.
Okay, and this is Fred Bouderi, the Acting Director of Community Development. And I want to just confirm what Mr. Cyprian just mentioned. So subsequent to the Vanda Meadows Environmental Impact Report being prepared and certified, the city did adopt its updated general plan, which includes the Vanda Meadows project and the additional projects on the east side of Leisure Town Road, such as Roberts Ranch, and identified the impacts of the cumulative growth scenario in that analysis. The Vanda Meadows project includes for example, street improvements and things of that nature that were identified as future improvements for the city's long-range development plan. So in this case, the project meets the requirements of CEQA for reaffirming the original environmental impact report, because the impact report does not require any substantial changes to address new impacts that were not already addressed. I hope that answers the question for you.
That is helpful to understand that it was included in the general plan update. So I appreciate that clarification. Fred, while you're on, one of the other concerns I have is from a development or a building and impact fee standpoint. It's my understanding that the development agreement as approved in 2013 effectively locked in the fee schedule for this project. Can you either confirm or deny that is the case? And my concern is that if it is the case, that they are going to be subject to a 2013 fee schedule in a significantly cost escalating environment, wherein the city subsequently has raised its fees substantially from that time, and an additional 10 years, the city would be losing out on, a fair amount of fee increases. Can you confirm that, Fred?
Well, the development agreement terms require the developers, as they come in and build their projects, to pay the current development impact fees as they obtain each building permit as the project goes forward. So citywide development impact fees that are applied equally across the entire city are paid based on the current schedules, not the original 2013 schedules. And I think Mr. Sebring can probably confirm that as well. If I've made any error there, certainly correct me, but the development agreements are written so that as the projects proceed over these lengths of time, they pay the development impact fees that are in effect at the time they obtain their building permit.
And that's correct. This is Christian Seabrian again. And it's important to note that, so long as a new fee is applied citywide, we'd also be subject to any new fees the city adopted, in addition to any escalators that are already in place.
Okay, and perhaps you could reference the original development agreement, section 5 F3, section 5 F3, limitations on development impact fees. The project site shall not be subject to any development impact fees enacted after the effective date of this agreement. So
that's correct. Well, let me just continue the sentence. It says, unless it applies on a citywide basis.
Okay.
And so that just means the project would not be subject to a project-specific impact fee that's created for this plan area. Okay. But if the city were to adopt a citywide new impact fee for a new category of improvement, it would be applicable.
Gotcha. Thank you for the clarification. Chair McCauley, the last thing I would add is I do believe that there does need to be additional time, and this is just my opinion here. There does need to be additional time added to the end of the expiration of this development agreement. I think 10 years is a push. My vote would be to be a 5-year extension.
Well, let's go ahead and hear any other questions or comments and public input, and then we'll close the comments, the public hearing, and decide what the proper things are to weigh in on the action. So hold on to that, if you were Commissioner. And Commissioner Lightfoot, you have some questions. Have they been answered, or do you still wish to pursue those?
So I'm just curious how the development projection, if that comes into play here, if there's a projection for completion in place, or that's in our information here.
So,
you want me to answer that, Chairman?
Yeah, go ahead, Mr. Flippy.
Okay, so right now, as I said earlier in our conversation, we are working with some builders. I'm not at liberty to say exactly who or what the status of negotiations are, but I think it's reasonable to expect that we hope to be in construction next year. As I indicated earlier, the plans are complete, or virtually complete, subject to some changes for phasing, and the map as well. And we're hoping to move forward. A lot of the things that were impediments over the last 7 years are still there. Having said that, scheduling out of a project like this of 400 plus units, it takes time, and they don't build out quickly. And to points about 5 years or 10 years, I would note that often a builder would like to build a model complex out that's about 1 home per week is an ideal pace of development. So if we only had 1 unit or village at a time, that's about 50 units. We have about 9 years worth of build out. So, I think the request for 10 years is appropriate, and considering all what we've had to kind of wait through, I think it's a good term, and we would really appreciate that. It holds our feet to the fire to keep going, but it also allows us the opportunity to move forward with some of the folks that we're having discussions with.
Commissioner Lightfoot, any other questions at this point?
Have you determined how many phases you're going to need to complete the project?
That's all being discussed right now. There's no, we don't know right this moment.
Commissioner Brett Johnson, your hand's up.
Point of clarification, please, Tom. The development agreement effectively holds the entitlements in place. What is then, besides the market, holding the developer back from recording the final map and effectively attaining the same result.
Well, okay, I'm not sure, other than how I've already answered it, what the question is, Brett. So, our intent is to move forward. None of these projects go quickly anymore. And, we're going to move quickly as we can, but we've had other issues that have held us up to this point.
And this is just.
I'm sure I'm answering your questions. I
I
apologize.
understand that.
Wait, too many people speaking. So first, Commissioner Johnson, do you have anything further that you would ask at this point?
Yes. Does not recordation of the final map effectively achieve the same result as extending the development agreement?
Yes and no. The problem with that is there's literally hundreds and potentially millions of dollars of fees that need to be paid in order to record that map. And so, some of it is if you're going to be moving forward with the recording of a final map, you need to pay all of the plan check and inspection fees, all of the Southeast Van and Benefit District fees, all of the Redstone Parkway fees. All of those things have to be paid at time of recording a final map. So if you're going to record a final map, it's important that you're going to move forward right away, because you'll also have to post bonds for those improvements. So it's a whole series of things that we would have to do in order to record that map. And this is a much simpler, easier process to simply ask for an extension of the time to give future buyers the surety that they know that they can move forward and not be hamstrung by a DA that right now would expire in 3 years, or at your suggestion, 8 years, when we would just like to be able to move forward with the knowledge that we're not going to be running up against an artificial deadline.
And if I may, this is Christian Seabrian, if I could.
Go ahead, Mr. Seabrian.
I'd just like to add that also, even if a final map were to be recorded, the development agreement vests additional development rights that go beyond that, such as to the specific plan, zoning, plan development approval. All those are also, those would not be vested by just a final map. The final map would create legal lots, and that's what you would have at that point. But you would not have vesting to everything else you need to get out of the ground.
Commissioner Johnson, you've put yourself on mute, but your hand is still up. Do you have anything else?
Yeah, I do. Tom, to use your words, I don't think that giving the developer an additional 10 years is an incentive to move forward. If anything, I understand it does give them the surety that they will have plenty of time to achieve what they wish to achieve. And that is why my suggestion of 5 years be the resolve, because it does incentivize them to move quickly, and it also assists the city to deliver lots to a market that is in dire need of housing. And so I'm going to stick with the 5-year request.
This is Chair McCauley, and I'm going to turn to the city attorney for a moment. I want to make sure that the things we're talking about regarding market conditions and things like that are within our purview for the discussion. I don't have any qualms about it, but I just want to make sure that we're staying within the limits we have for the things we're allowed to consider in taking an action. Do you have any advice for us?
I think it's appropriate to consider anything that would result in the commission's findings to support their decision this evening.
Great, thank you very much. Do we have any other commission members that have questions for the applicant at this point? Do we have any members of the public who are participating who wish to ask questions or make comments at this time? And we'll give a chance for people to push the right buttons to show up.
We have Wendy Brecken.
Okay, go ahead and activate Ms. Brecken. Go ahead.
Hi, I have a couple questions. One is, for cumulative impacts, don't you need a master environmental impact report to see if there's sort of irreversible impacts on the area? In particular, I'm concerned about fire, since we just had the LNU Lightning Complex fire, which sort of threatened the whole area. And in the Southtown area, there was buildup of traffic, and people had problems evacuating. There's that issue of, what about evacuation routes? Shouldn't that be considered as part of an EIR? And maybe there should be some kind of a mitigated neg deck or a new EIR, rather than just kind of extending the old one. Because not only, it seems like there's all kinds of development going on there, and it hasn't maybe been considered in a master EIR, but we also have this kind of increased fire threat. And another question I had is on the traffic, just everyday traffic. What did the EIR say that this added to the traffic patterns, and did it include all of the developments in the area? Thank you.
So staff, I'll ask you to go ahead and address that.
This is Fred Bouderi again. I think I can answer those questions, and certainly Albert or applicant, if you have additional information, certainly help me out. The Vanden Meadows EIR was a project-specific and large-scale level, I guess I'd say, environmental impact report. It addressed the impacts of the entire Vanden Meadows development. And in fact, planning for fire protection was a part of the specific plan and the environmental studies. In particular, the edges of the project, especially on the south edge, on the west side of Vanden Road, were designed with fire breaks and restrictions on the proximity of structures to open lands that are on the south side of the city limit there. And so these issues were considered during the original environmental studies. The area is also well within the response time regarding access for emergency services for the new fire station that was being built at the time in the Southtown development area at Magnolia Park, just visible on the north side of the screen that you see here on the upper part of the screen. So the Vanden Meadows EIR was a program and project-specific level environmental impact report that addressed the impacts of the entire development program. The fire issues were addressed there, and of course the environmental impact report at that scale addresses the cumulative and combined traffic impacts of the planned and foreseeable development in the area. So the roadway design was designed to accommodate the city's long-range growth plans, and as you can see on the screen there, is in the process of being built out. So all of those issues were addressed in the environmental impact report, which is why we would recommend that we reaffirm that the original EIR is adequate for purposes of CEQA for this particular request.
Thank you, Mr. Bouderi. Are there any other members of the public that have questions they'd like to ask or statements they'd like to make? And Nancy, does anybody show up on the screen? Nobody shows up online.
No.
Give a few more moments for people to indicate their interest.
Chair McCauley,
Yes.
I see a message in the chat box from a Mr. Roberto Valdez indicating I wish to speak.
Okay, since I don't have a chat box showing up on my screen, if you can go ahead and accommodate Mr. Valdez and give him the opportunity to speak.
Chair, this is Albert. It would appear that the attendee, Mr. Valdez, we're unable to activate his talking ability. because he's using an older version of Zoom. That's the message that we're getting back from it.
Okay. So, Mr. Valdez, there is also an opportunity to call in and participate that way. Albert, can you go ahead and send a text to Roberto and make sure he knows how else he can participate by phone if he wishes to do so? And I want to take maybe a couple of moments while staff and the public work this out so that they can indeed have the chance for our participants to participate. So this may take a second, but we're going to take the time to make it happen. Well, Albert is trying to work with Roberto. Are there any other members of the public who wish to participate, or commissioners that have additional questions for the applicant and the applicant's engineer? I see Commissioner Brett Johnson. Go ahead, Brett.
Yeah, I wanted to speak a little bit more to the market conditions aspect of the findings of for why this should be extended an additional 10 years. I think it's easily arguable that the market conditions are as favorable as they have been from a development standpoint in Solano County over probably the past 10 years. Given the demand to move to a less urban setting from the Bay Area, and we can argue whether that is a positive or negative for the community another time. But as it relates to demand, I think it is in our best interest to provide that housing that has already been approved to the market, and delaying that delivery of housing does not help the community at large. And I'd like to, hear any other commissioner comments on that, or any other aspects of this too.
And before we go into a further discussion, I want to make sure we're first seeing questions for the applicant and the applicant's engineer right now. As we get into the actual discussion of opinions and options, I want to make sure we fully heard from the public before we do that. So I know we're kind of in a hybrid situation right here, and I appreciate your participation, but I want to focus first on questions for the applicant. And I'll ask staff, are you having any success right now with getting Mr. Valdez with his chance to participate?
Chair, we are not.
So a process question then, this does go on to the city council for final action, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so we can't wait all night for an opportunity, but I would ask staff to continue to work with Mr. Valdez, so even if he doesn't have a chance to participate tonight, the comments are heard and are able to go on to the city council when final action is taken on that. And you can also text any questions you would have, Mr. Valdez. Thank you for that payment. So are there any other members of the public who wish to participate at this point? Seeing none, so we are just finishing up on item 7A, villages at hand, and I see a question in comments on what we're on. So I'm going to wait just a little bit longer since Ms. Minion asked what we're talking about.
Chair,
Go ahead.
we have a caller ending in 211.
Okay, caller 211, go ahead.
Oh, hi. I'm so sorry. I wasn't able to log on until now, and I had a question on the abandoned meadows. Oh, hold on. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you. Can you go ahead and identify yourself for the record, please?
Yes, Alicia Minion.
Okay, go ahead, Ms. Minion.
And yes, okay. So I'm sorry, I was working and I'm just now able to dial in, and I was interested in commenting on the abandoned meadows item. And I was just wondering, did I miss that?
No, that's the item we're on. Go ahead with your comment, please.
Okay, great. So, and maybe this was answered. I apologize, but So I had just kind of a general question. So my understanding of the item is that the development agreement is being extended from 2023 to 2033. The EIR is dated 2013. And I was wondering, what I was wondering is that allowed, and if I'm assuming it's allowed because it's 10-year extension, but it's 3 years, it's only 2020, right? So you're extending it 10 years, 3 years early. And maybe this is typical and maybe there's some, logical reason for it. But the EIR being 2013, would that have to be revisited if it was granted to the 2033 timeframe? The other question I had is, in looking at the developer agreement, I was looking at the person who signed it, the developer, and I believe they had once owned some land off Vanden that was donated to the city for the purpose of building affordable housing, I think specifically for military. And I was wondering if that donation, that transaction, impacted this particular one. So what I'm getting at is this sort of a favor to the developer because of the donation of the land off kind of close to Vanden and Alamo? If that makes sense? And also it was, yeah. And then the last question is, when do we really expect reasonably to have houses built on this? Because sometimes I see these developer agreements that get extended for 10-year block and then, nothing's happening. So I don't understand why developer agreements are entered into so early if the developer doesn't plan on building for many, many years. And I'm just curious why that's the case. Thank you very much.
So staff, I'm going to ask if my understanding of CEQA documents is right, that there's not a hard date at which they expire. It's simply a judgment question of whether the information in an environmental document is still current and accurate enough to be relied upon or not. But it really is a judgment call rather than a hard date established in law. Is that correct?
That is correct. This is Fred Buderi.
And it's your conclusion that the document for the current and the anticipated life of the project is still adequate. Is that also correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Then the speaker had some other questions. Is there anything you wish to address on those?
I'll just add, I'm not familiar with the land donation. It may be, so I'm not aware of the connection between the two items. Mm-hmm. And now I've forgotten there was a third question. Sorry, Alicia, I apologize.
On the question on the timing, I believe, Mr. Baderi. And I believe Mr. Filippi had talked earlier on that of what he expects the timing on the project to be.
That's correct. So it is actually very common for the development agreements to be, the developer is trying to plan ahead and market this property over a long period of time. And so, as Mr. Filippi described earlier, the actual build out of a project of this scale is just taking enough time that they believe this is the amount of time that will help them complete the project with the development agreement still in effect and develop it as approved originally.
Thank you. Nancy, we had any luck getting hold of Mr. Valdez and his ability to participate at tonight's meeting?
Hi, this is Albert. I have been on the phone with Mr. Valdez, and he is trying to call in with his phone. He's just got off the phone with him about getting the correct meeting identification number and then calling in. So he's been prompted. I recommend that we kind of wait a few more minutes to see if he's able to call in because I think he has a lot to say.
And for everyone else who's on this, thank you for your indulgence as we seek to maximize public participation. There was a question that showed up in the chat room asking that if the development agreement is expired, what would the zoning revert to if the development agreement does expire? Fred, is there anything you can address on that?
The zoning would remain in effect, and the specific plan approval would also remain in effect.
And because this is largely surrounded by urban use, you would not revert to any sort of previous agricultural activity, which out in this area was probably grazing land anyway, would be my guess.
Yeah.
So.
That is correct.
Mr. Chairman?
Who's calling? Who's that?
Tom Filippi. I have my hand raised, but I thought, well, we got a minute.
Doesn't show up on my screen. Go ahead, Mr. Filippi.
Okay, so I was going to address the issue of the land donation on Vanden Road. That donation, I don't know exactly when it happened, but it was probably 10 or 15 years ago. And quite candidly, I was involved in that and I had totally forgot about it. I just want to make sure it's crystal clear that the city has not considered that at all in this. There's no special favors happening because of that donation many, many years ago. I'm surprised. I'm a little bit at a loss at how that even came up since it was so long ago.
Thank you, Mr. Filippi. Albert, any progress?
He just called me back. He's still struggling with it. As a last resort, it might be beneficial to maybe connect the speaker from my desk phone to my headset, so that way he can speak through my my microphone that I'm using right now. But Mr. Valdez asked to attempt one more time to see if he can call in.
Talking that you would even raise a pup.
I'm sorry, I don't know who just spoke and I didn't quite understand what was said.
We have an open mic on Wendy Brecken.
Okay. Ms. Brecken, you have an open mic. Could you please go ahead and close it since you're not addressing the commission at the moment?
Oh. I'm sorry, I don't know how to close it. Shoot.
I don't know, but we can still hear you.
All right, Chair, sorry about that. There was a small number mix up between Mr. Valdez and myself, and it sounds like he's got the right number and he should be able to call in just momentarily.
Okay. I see somebody in the chat room. And again, while we're hoping that Mr. Valdez can come in, a question on the chat. What park will be providing service to this area? Is it part of the Magnolia Park service area, or is there some other park that provides access for it?
Mr. Chairman, I can answer that if you'd like.
Go ahead, Mr. Flippy.
So there is a park spot, 6 acres, designated in the estates at Vanden Meadows area. And so all of the Vanden Meadows project is responsible for that park. So it will be in an additional park will be created in that Vanden Meadows area.
Okay. Thank you. So I want us to be able to proceed with this evening's meeting. It does look like getting Roberto Valdez is maybe an insurmountable technical issue. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and close the public hearing so that we can go ahead and start having commission discussion, since there is at least a question on how long the extension could be. Albert, if Roberto is able to make contact, I will go ahead and reopen the public hearing so we can hear Mr. Valdez's comments and then take that into consideration as we finalize our action. In order to move forward, and if there's no other hands that are raised, I can go ahead and close the public hearing and now ask for the commission to debate the project. We specifically heard Commissioner Brent Johnson recommending a 5-year rather than a 10-year extension. And I'd like the input from the rest of the commission on whether they think that's a good idea. Would anyone like to address the commission?
This is Commissioner Beaumont.
Commissioner Beaumont, go ahead.
Yeah, I appreciate Brett's 5-year agreement. I personally think 10 years is more reasonable. It gives the developer, since no ground has been broken yet, no developer has been found, no builders yet. It gives the city that inventory that we know will likely be built, rather than with 5 years, it could be a rush that we may not get it done. So in my opinion, I think 10 years is more reasonable, just in my opinion.
Thank you, Commissioner Beaumont. Would any other commissioners like to chime in on this particular issue?
Yes.
Commissioner Aldridge, go ahead.
I agree with Commissioner Beaumont on the 10-year because I think I've been around long enough to know how slow this stuff moves. And I think that the comfort level for the developer and so on would be much better with the 10-year rather than the 5.
Commissioner Brett Johnson, your hand's up again. Go ahead.
Yeah, just to reiterate to the fellow commissioners, we are not giving them 5 years. The development agreement is not expiring this year. That still leaves them with 8 years to complete the project from today. And so hence my recommendation for an additional 5 years. 8 years is plenty of time to execute this business plan. And you know, it's my opinion that, you know, by giving someone too much time, I think we've all gone to school and we know what our deadline is for the essay, but we inevitably always wait till it's due to get it done. And you know, the same thing happens in development. And I'm gonna stick to my recommendation of the extension of only 5 years as opposed to 10, still leaving them with 8 years to complete the improvements.
Thank you, Commissioner Johnson. Commissioner Lightfoot, go ahead.
So in review, I appreciate everybody's comments. Brett, thank you for being very thorough. I'm more of the opinion to approve 10 years rather than 5 years, but I'm also able to consider a better projection by the builder or more information on why 10 years would be preferable over 5 years, or how, you know, what's the real projection on this project to get completed.
Thanks, Commissioner Lightfoot.
Can I address that question?
Not yet. Right now, we're just going through commission comments. We may come back and reopen the public hearing on that, but at this point, I want to give all the commissioners a chance to speak. I'll note Commissioner Brett Johnson and Commissioner Lightfoot still have their hands up, so if you're done, please turn that indicator off. And Vice Chair Fortney, go ahead, you have the floor.
Hello?
Vice Chair Fortney, it looks like you're still muted.
You got me there?
We have you now.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah, I'm looking at completion and build out. So I'm leaning towards the recommendation that staff is providing. That's my only comment.
Okay, and I have a text from Albert saying that he's able to let Mr. Valdez speak over the speakerphone. I know Mr. Filippi wanted to address something. So I'm going to go ahead, and this is unusual, but I'm going to reopen the public hearing and first provide an opportunity for Roberto Valdez to speak. So go ahead, Mr. Valdez.
All right, stand by. Hold on.
Commissioner Robert Marley.
So Albert, I can't hear him right now.
Okay, public commissioners and public and whoever is on your online access for the meeting. I want to say thank you for letting me speak, and I apologize for the cumbersome indirect way of communicating. But I don't know what's going on with this system. You know, this is my second time that I try to access the city website to be able to participate in the city council and the planning commission meeting on an important item. Anyway, this is my, I had 3 questions originally, but I think Mr. Albert was very nice to explain to me today and yesterday how I could get the answer to about, I was asking what were the changes for the developer that the developer was requesting for the amendments, okay? and I think he answered that. But there's two other questions that I have. Number one, I noticed too, then the survey that you send out to the residents within 600 feet from the project site, there were 258 public notices that were sent out. Mr. Albert informed me today that nobody has responded, and this notices was sent on November 4th, 2020. As you can see, it's a very short window of opportunity for the resident to respond. So I'm asking, why is there a rush on this decision right now? Okay, don't you want to give the public opportunity to respond more thoroughly, especially the residents who live there? I do not live there, but I do care about what happens in our community, and certainly what is the impact that all these projects are having, including this particular one, right at the corner of Vanden Road and Leisure Town Road. What it's doing, in my opinion, and a humble opinion, I think, is that it's canceling the whole purpose of the reliever road. I hate to think what would happen to us if there was a serious emergency, and I don't think I have to explain that to you. I think you have common sense enough to know that. But the other thing, and it's a very narrow road to begin with. But let me go to my second question. So that's my first question. My second question is, again, due to the COVID-19 resurgence that we're undergoing now, and it's getting worse, I've noticed too that a project is still active. The 10 years is still active to 2023, the year 2023. Also the 10 years. Again, why is it that you are rushing to approve rather than to even table, this, so that, again, people have, the public has a better opportunity to respond? I will tell you, in my experience already with the city access online system, it is very cumbersome, very difficult, and I've been denied to speak my thoughts, which I think you're all trying to do the best for the city, but there's a lot of restrictions, and it's very difficult to communicate. And now, let's wait on it. Help the community decide. That particular project, Vanden Meadows, right at that intersection that I told you. On the corner
you're a little bit past your 3 minutes, so I'm going to ask you to go ahead and wrap up.
Traffic there, it's changing the whole area. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Valdez. Gave a bit more than 3 minutes, but that's okay.
So please answer my question.
Okay, so at this point, I'm going to go ahead and ask, because we'll get to directing to any of the questions about the timing, and that will include the question I'll ask Mr. Baderi right now. When will this go on to the city council, and will there be an additional notice for the council meeting as well as there was for this one?
We have not set the date for the council hearing on this project yet. However, there will be additional notices mailed out in advance of that hearing whenever it is scheduled. So folks will receive that notice of that meeting.
And we're on tonight's schedule because the applicant asked for this rather than the city asked for that. Is that correct or not?
Yes, that is correct.
So within the commission's purview would be the ability, if we wish, to delay our action if we wanted. And I'm trying to make sure that, because of Mr. Valdez's questions about timing, we know what our options are. We could table this, vote to approve, vote to recommend it not approve. I just want to make sure I know what our options are.
Yes, I think that is correct. If there was additional information you wanted, you could continue the hearing to allow time for that if you felt there was additional information you needed in order to decide on the applicant's request.
Thank you, Mr. Baderi. Mr. Filippi, again, since I reopened the public hearing and you asked to address one of the comments that have come up from commission, and give you the chance, then I'm going to go ahead and reclose the public hearing and we'll get this to commission action. So Mr. Flippy, you can proceed.
I'm sorry, I muted myself. So very quickly to Mr. Valdez's point, we also had 2 signs on the property. So anyone in the vicinity that had passed by would be able to see that there was a public hearing notice. Having said that, the other question was on timing, and there seems to be a lot of discussion between 5 years and 10 years. I'd like to go back just very briefly to what I said earlier. For most of the builder clients that we work with, a good pace of development is 1 home a week. 50 homes a year is a good pace of development for one village. And so if this is over 450 units, a good pace of development with one developer, if it was one developer, would be 9 years. So now we're hoping that we could do better than that, but a reasonable pace of development for a project of this size is 9 years. And so we're working through, as I said before, we're working through a whole lot of issues with the estates at Vanda Meadows that took several years. We had to have that road realigned. We had to have the Vanda and Foxborough intersection work all completed before we could even really think about trying to market this property. So we've been held up. I think the request is reasonable for the reasons I stated in the outline of the timing of development. And I've been doing this 43 years. It takes a long time to build out a project. That's all I'd like.
Brett Johnson, your hand is raised, so you can proceed.
I appreciate Mr. Phillippe's comment on the potential absorption. I think what's not being effectively communicated is the reality that more than one village will be being built and sold at the same time, especially phase one.
Not a for sure.
Oh, wait, Mr. Flippy. Mr. Johnson has the floor, and I'm going to let him finish his comment. Go ahead, Brett.
I should let it be known that a project manager for one of the builders that is in contract to buy 2 of the neighborhoods of phase 1 has reached out to me to get my opinion of certain aspects of the project. So I do know that multiple villages are being contemplated to be constructed at the same time. And the way that home building works, you count the number of villages based on the lot type. So effectively, the 50-foot and the 60-foot lots will be built and sold concurrently. So the estimated time frame, while accurate if being built one neighborhood at a time, one product type at a time, would be correct. That is not a correct statement in this instance because the pace would be significantly faster than is being communicated. Hence my request to only approve a 5-year extension, which would allow 8 years to complete this project.
So at this point, I'm going to make sure I have good control over who is speaking. At this point, I'm going to ask Mr. Flippy, you are seeking to participate a little bit more. I'll give you one more chance, and then we're going to close this and move on to commission action. Mr. Flippy, you may proceed.
I'm just going to respectfully agree to disagree with Mr. Johnson and end it there. Thank you.
At this point, we're now going to formally close the public hearing. I have heard from 1, 2, 3, 4 of the commissioners on the question of 5 or 10 years. I'm going to ask if Commissioners Alan Johnson or Vice Chair Courtney wish to chime in on their thoughts on this particular issue.
I think I'm good.
I take it that was Commissioner Alan Johnson?
Yes, sir.
I'm going to ask you to translate, I think I'm good, as in that's no comment, or you favor one side or the other?
I think I'm leaning towards granting the extension as requested, unless there's something else that comes up.
Thank you. Clarity.
Commissioner McCauley?
Go, who is that?
That's Courtney.
Okay, Vice Chair Fortney, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm going with the recommended action from staff and the extension of 10 years. I'm looking at the build out, and I understand what Commissioner Johnson is stating. That's hypothetically, and I don't want to lock into something if it changes and not have that 10-year flexibility. So I'm going with staff's recommendation.
Okay, so just doing a quick tabulation, we have the majority of the commissions sound like they're looking at the 10 years. And so I'm going to ask one of those commissioners who supported the 10-year time extension, unless there's any other comments. I'll give a moment for any other comments to show up. Then I'll ask one of the 10-year supporting commissioners to go ahead and make a motion.
This is Commissioner Beaumont.
Go ahead, Commissioner Beaumont.
I'd like to make a motion to recommend that the City Council reaffirm the Vanden Meadows Environmental Impact Report and adopt the Villages at Vanden Meadows Development Agreement Amendment.
I second that.
We have a motion by Commissioner Beaumont, a second by Commissioner Aldrich. I would like the Secretary to call the roll, please.
Commissioner Aldrich,
Yes.
Beaumont,
Yes.
Alan Johnson,
Aye.
Brett Johnson,
No.
Commissioner Lightfoot,
Yes.
Vice Chair Fortney,
Yes.
Chair McCauley.
Yes. The recommendation is approved 6-1, and we'll go on to the City Council according to Mr. Videri at a date not yet certain. And again, I would emphasize that you work with Mr. Valdez, who clearly had trouble getting in, to make sure that he does have a chance to properly participate on the council meetings. We tend to have much more crowded agendas and don't have the opportunity to wait as we do. Thank you all who participated. We're now moving on to business items. Item number 8A is the Biotechnology and Advanced Manufacturing Initiative. And it looks like our staff contact is Mr. Videri. Staff, you may proceed.
Thank you very much. This is a presentation for the Commission on the Vacaville Biomanufacturing, Biotechnology and Advanced Manufacturing Initiative. This represents the city's primary and most important economic development initiative at the present time. The Commission is going to receive a presentation from Don Burris, who is the city's Director of Economic Development Services, and from Matt Gardner, who is the consultant, helping the city in establishing the biomanufacturing program for economic development purposes, and is the president of the Vacaville Biomanufacturing, or the California Biomanufacturing Center, which is a part of the initiative and is headquartered here in Vacaville. So you're going to receive a presentation also covering part of the project tonight will be City Planner Payman Bevand, who will be discussing part of the city's land use development processing standards and policies for implementing the initiative. And in this case, the presenters are hoping to receive from the Planning Commission a statement of your support for the initiative. This isn't an actual land use approval type action. It's a presentation on an effort underway, but they are interested in hearing the Commission's comments on this follow-up presentation you're receiving, and hopefully receiving your statement of support for the initiative and their efforts. So I'll turn it over to the team there.
Thank you, Mr. Videri. Good evening, Chairman McCauley, Vice Chair Fortney, and Commissioners. Don Burris here, Director of Economic Development Services. Thank you all for allowing myself and the city's biomanufacturing strategist, Matt Gardner, to present to you this evening an update on the implementation of the city's biotechnology and advanced manufacturing strategy. At the August 18th Commission meeting, Mr. Gardner and I shared the overall strategy with the Commission, and that phase 1 of the strategy has been completed, and we are currently implementing phase 2 of the initiative. As you all may recall, phase 1 of this proactive initiative was approved by the City Council at the February 25th meeting, And this phase of the initiative included an in-depth analysis of the two industries, recommendations for new branding efforts, a proposed marketing plan, new marketing materials and tools. And as I said, this phase has been completed and staff is currently implementing phase 2 of the initiative. Phase 2 was approved by the council on April 28th. And this phase establishes the foundational details of the city's work plan. Very specifically, the primary task associated with phase 2 includes setting up the recommended nonprofit organization, which is the California Biomanufacturing Center, and establishing new branding and marketing materials around that. This new nonprofit organization will be used to proactively attract new business investment in Vacaville, which also, while also providing support to our existing biotech businesses. As Mr. Broderi mentioned earlier, Mr. Gardner has been, or still is, the city's consultant working with us on this initiative. But we're happy to say, as of the launch of the California Biomanufacturing Center, Mr. Gardner will be its first actual president operating that facility. So on October 22nd, the city of Vacaville was really fortunate to have United States Congressman John Garamendi officiate over the actual press announcement where we told the world that the city of Vacaville is actually moving forward with this strategy to bring more biomanufacturing to Vacaville. This is at the heart of this whole strategy. It's an economic development effort to attract more companies and at the end of the day, create high value jobs for our residents and of course, enhance our tax base. So please allow me to apologize for not being able to present to you prior to the press announcement. We really had a lot of back and forth with our elected officials' calendars. So the date that we selected fell outside of our ability to get to you to present to you and the city council prior to the press announcement. This phase of the initiative has been kept pretty confidential, as numerous communities throughout the United States and locally in the East Bay are also now developing strategies that are in direct competition with the city of Vacaville's efforts. So to protect the city's interests, the economic development staff did not make this phase of the initiative very public. The press announcement was also coordinated with the assistance of the Solano County Health official, who requested that the city limit the number of attendees to be compliant with the Solano County guidance for safer social interactions. So because of these limitations and the confidentiality that needed to be maintained until the press announcement, the city was not able to extend invitations to the city council or planning commission to attend the press announcement. And we wholeheartedly apologize for not being able to extend those invitations to you. The press announcement thus far has been very successful and has yielded positive results. Staff has been contacted by several biotechnology developers and biotechnology companies who have expressed interest in working with the city to build and bring their companies to Vacaville. So having Congressman Garamendi facilitate the launch of the California Biomanufacturing Center has put Vacaville in the national spotlight, and we really couldn't be more pleased. And we're confident that more interest is soon to follow. Having shared that information with you all, very happy to be able to present where we are today with our new nonprofit organization. And I will turn the rest of our presentation over to Matt Gardner, President of the California Biomanufacturing Center.
Thank you, Don and Chair McCauley and Commissioners. It's a pleasure to be back with you this evening. I will just very quickly go through a very brief summary update on the biomanufacturing strategy and really emphasize more the center. I know that you've heard this in various forms before, so I hope that this won't be too repetitive. We as you know, we got here by taking a look at the sort of distance from Vacaville's economic profile today and what it might be at build out, and looking at the areas around where biotech is currently clustered and thinking about the potential highest and best use of potentially supporting investors in some of those green spaces. In going through that thought process and seeking stakeholder input for about a year, we heard from many folks about the interest in doing something together and doing something to drive Vacaville forward. Among the 20 or so recommendations that came from that long stakeholder process was the recommendation to create this organization. And as you heard from us in our last discussion with you, we aimed to create a brand that would be overarching for this effort, that would potentially brand the area, the region of the city or within the city, as well as the agency that is working on supporting those companies and supporting the attraction efforts. So I forget which commissioner, so forgive me for this, but one of you asked about the parallels to Research Triangle Park, and that is exactly right. That's exactly what we're going for. That's how we arrived at the name California Biomanufacturing Center. The name, the brand applies to both the area that we're inviting companies to consider investing in, and California Biomanufacturing Center, Inc. is the name of the nonprofit that the city has created to support the companies that live there, to help investors explore what's possible in the city, and to work collaboratively with the companies that do arrive on, for example, their workforce needs and continuing best practice and professional development. Go ahead, Nancy. So one of the things that we wanted to maintain as a foundation here is a reminder that the Vacaville position is incredibly unique, and I don't want to spend too much time going back over material you've already heard, but just as a reminder, every community in the world is trying to attract biotech. Almost none of them have what you have. So what we've got that makes our story different is this legacy that goes back to 1987 with Alex Zaffaroni. He's pictured here, he's on the far right, holding a medal in his hands. ALZA arrived in 1987 at the same time as large-scale biology, and that base of manufacturers makes your life sciences community vastly different than 99% of the others around the world pursuing biotechnology investors. So, like I say, we arrived at this point of wanting to look at the greenfield opportunity as the potential for highest and best use, and because of the surrounding areas around the existing biotech manufacturers, arrived at this strategy for the center. Go ahead, Nancy. As I mentioned, we went through about a year of focus groups, thanks to Don's effort in collecting industry interested in participating in this process. It very much was the kind of industry, academic, and government partnership that you would hope, where folks who are committed to Vacaville's direction forward and prosperity were participants all the way throughout. And so really was, I think, a very positive process with a tremendous amount of support coming from stakeholders in the community. We heard from quite a few folks about the directions of the biotech industry itself, how it's changing and evolving, and that it's much more than just the kind of commonly thought of therapeutic types of manufacturers. And so there's quite a lot more opportunity for Vacaville going forward in other types of bioprocessing. I don't mean to trouble us too much tonight with the technical aspects of what we're looking at, but we're already seeing companies in production on things like bioplastics to make things like lawn chairs, as simple as a consumer product like that, where there's a biotech application for replacing a traditionally petrochemical process. And so there are lots of reasons to think of that as an advantage. And those companies are already growing. They're growing all over the world. We have an opportunity to identify some of those and invite them to come and operate out of a base in Vacaville. Among the things that have been heightened during the coronavirus, the international supply chain in the industry has been shaken by not only the virus, but the resulting national security conversations, not just in the US, but everywhere. And so trusted supply chains are going to continue to be a factor for years to come. The supply chain is going to change tremendously, and we're right in the thick of those conversations with quite a few companies. Go ahead, Nancy. So we took the opportunity this year to, like I say, make something like 20 recommendations or so that fit hand in glove with a number of other actions that the city could and in some cases was already taking. We looked carefully at gaps in this program and what might need to be there 10 to 15 years out as well. And really worked very collaboratively with every city agency that might touch on this kind of program going forward. The quote zone, if you will, is the roughly 300 greenfield acres that's in about 15 to 20 separate parcels in the area, roughly bordered by 505 and 80 along Vacaville Parkway. So it's the kind of area where we've got training already in place at Solano College, existing manufacturers already in place in multiple locations in that area, and very supportive and conducive to further investments by manufacturers. There are other parts of Vacaville that are attractive to biotech companies, and so we obviously hope that companies will consider investing in Vacaville anywhere that they might think about this. So that sort of triangle-shaped area by itself isn't the only place companies are looking. It just creates a focal point for that conversation. The new organization's been formed, the branding's in place, and the center nonprofit has been filed with the IRS. So the city has itself a new, in effect, public-private partnership supporting its economic development efforts and in place to support the companies that arrive. Thank you, Commissioner Beaumont, for that note. That question was perfect when you asked it, and it's exactly where we were headed. Go ahead, Nancy. So as really, Don gave us quite a few opportunities to think through what we might look like 10 to 20 years forward. And in a lot of conversations locally with stakeholders, we knew that we had an opportunity to create a marketing program for investment attraction that would bring a lot of potential to this area. So you see highlighted here like I said, that roughly kind of piece of pizza shaped wedge between the two interstates. And as I say, it's not the only place where we're exploring biotech investment with potential investors. It just creates a focal point for that conversation. We've begun conversations with a number of the kinds of companies who might invest. It's also important to note that we've already begun to hear from the sort of brokers and site selection consultants who will be extra value adding as force multipliers to their own networks about what the opportunity is that we sit on here. Go ahead. So what do we aim to do with this nonprofit? In general, our goal is to support industry that arrives and those that already reside in Vacaville and make it a specialty sort of industry organization supporting and fostering their success. And really, that's one of the things that we identified in those focus groups as missing from the local conversation. So we'll really just try and support industry in its activities, its needs, its concerns about growth, and its ability to be successful. And that's a very simple purpose. And I think it just shouldn't be taken for granted that that was a missing element in the discussion. So we'll be there as a partner. And we'll be there as a vehicle to foster that success and growth for the city as well. Go ahead. Thanks, Nancy. So we've created a temporary home for the immediate future thanks to a growing partnership with Solano College. This is one of the buildings owned by the college across the street from Genentech. And as plans for some of the real estate development on the adjacent acreage, continue and progress, we'll hope to build a permanent home in the new development. But for now, we're setting up shop at 2000 North Village Parkway, across the street from the biotech campus of Solano College. Go ahead, Nancy. So we've launched the basic elements of the marketing presence and just a very basic informational web page for now that's not yet very interactive, but it'll continue to grow in order to be able to just begin to explain to people what this is all about and how it will support industry presence and growing needs, expansion needs, and those types of things. Go ahead, Nancy. The organization is obviously there to also be a partner to the city. And so as we look at what's going to be happening with new investors, we can already tell you from some of the conversations we've had that there's some very detailed questions about these types of complex investments coming in, the types of infrastructure that they'll require, what it's like to build an FDA certified facility and maintain it. And so we're working very closely with Don and through Don with, I would say, every agency in the city that we've encountered has been incredibly supportive of this process, knowing that if you're a biotech company and you've got an FDA approved product, going through a process that's going to take 2 to 3 years versus one that can be put on an accelerated timeline makes an enormous difference to those companies. And so it is incredibly meaningful to them that we offer an opportunity for a quicker review. Go ahead, Nancy. That's it. The new contact information is up and it's live. And so I think I'll turn back to Don, and I know Payman from there as well. I'm certainly going to stay around if there's any question about anything we've presented here.
Thank you, Matt. Commissioners, if you have a few questions for us, we're happy to field those. But we do have a little bit more of a presentation with City Planner Payman Bevan. So, Chair, I will leave that to you if you'd like for us to take questions, or if you'd like to still see a little bit more of the presentation with Payman.
And I think I'd like you to go ahead and finish up your presentation before we take questions and comments. So go ahead.
Excellent. Thank you, Commissioner.
Good evening, Commissioners. This is Payman Bevan. I'm the City Planner for the City of Vacaville. So, hand in hand with what Don and Matt have discussed and sort of their efforts for a citywide program, we attempted to sort of very clearly for investors and others kind of define where we were coming from a land use development angle on biotech development. So in that regard, we sort of put together a sheet, a poster, if you will, that will be shared with investors and other folks in marketing materials to just let developers have a sense of how their projects will be processed once they choose Vacaville. And this isn't, it's not really that different than what we've done already for biotechnology facilities, going back to Genentech and how that was processed, the sort of priority that it received is what we're mimicking again as a reminder to folks. So we've outlined the steps that the city would take to again address biotech development, beginning with staff. So in addition to our economic development staff, Don, Matt, Tim Patton, we're working through planning with our project review teams in PRC and others to really give that comfort to folks that when they come to Vacaville as part of this biotech strategy.
For the members of the public who don't know, could you tell us what PRC is?
Sure. Sorry. So the PRC stands for Project Review Committee. In Vacaville, any development application that's submitted is referred to our Project Review Committee. Our Project Review Committee consists of planning, building, fire, public works, fire, police, all the different departments in the city. And what this group does is evaluates development review applications, find them complete or incomplete, and perform their evaluations based on city standards, general plan, development code. And this group actually then prepares conditions of approval that are included in project approval documents. So for anybody who's seen projects come through Planning Commission or City Council, those staff reports and conditions of approval are prepared through our work with our project review. So the same thing would apply here for biotech facilities, except that the projects that we identify as essential to our strategy will be sort of given a high priority a label so that they can be processed much quicker than a typical application. And, as is the case with residential or other commercial development, for folks who are interested in building in Vacaville, for them to know really what the process is, but also, how much time is going to be spent is really valuable information. Timing for development review affects financing, affects construction, it affects all aspects of development. So the more we can really commit to from a timing perspective, the better chance we have of getting the companies that we're looking for, but also really continue to build on our reputation as a center for biotech manufacturing in California and perhaps the world. So in that regard, as I mentioned, we talk about staffing and where we'd have really as a designated person for the project, and they would really lead the charge on making sure that whatever our timelines are, that they are met. Right now, we as a general timeline standard for biotech projects are aiming for approving those projects within 90 to 100 days, which that's the minimum. There are some, if everything is in place in terms of zoning, environmental clearances, that could be 60 to 90 days. So 90 to 100 days is really our goal, and we're sort of putting in place the staffing and our efforts to accommodate that. So this sheet again is something that is speaking to the potential developers or investors in our city. So outside of staffing, we look at location, and this is something that planning staff has worked with Dawn's group in preparing maps, not only maps, but having really stories for each parcel that folks are interested in. Zoning, APN, infrastructure that's available, what the process would be. So that's, again, all within the context of giving folks a package of information that gives them the sense that this is where they want to be, this is where they should be, and it's going to be really a painless process. So all of this is really intended to give folks that comfort. In terms of the entitlement process, again, the 90 to 100 days is what we are aiming for from application submittal to land use approval. Now, there are, again, as I mentioned, parcels that probably are further along for development than others. So some will be 90 to 100 days, some will be less than that. There might be some that require additional evaluation, environmental or otherwise, that might go outside of that. But our goal is 90 to 100 days. And we do have the experience. I've been here almost 22 years. Our chief building official has been here almost 30 years. And we have a lot of folks that were involved with the early days of biotech development in Vacaville. Jay Salazar, for example, our chief building official, was very active and in leading the development on the applicant's behalf by being in touch with their construction crews, with their financing crews, to make sure that however we did our work, it was going to benefit them, and getting construction done and getting their permits done very quickly. So we do have the staffing and the experience to do that, and it's simply just regrouping to support the efforts that Don and Matt and the City Council has undertaken. When it comes to building permits, sort of the same thing. We are going to rely on our chief building official and his expertise and his staff's expertise to work very closely with the developer's team. And whereas we would typically get somebody to drop off a plan check, and we process it and send back comments, we would actually meet and sort of go through the construction schedule for a project to make sure we're accommodating things as closely as we can, so that, again, they have a comfort that their construction schedule can be met if certain things fall into place. That does, of course, require commitments from their team as well as city staff's team, so that if we're looking for information, that it's communicated back to us in a timely fashion as well. And really the last part is inspection and post-approval support. We would have a designated building inspector to perform all the inspections. And right now, again, the reason why we're confident in sort of committing to this is we do this for the large part already. Right now, we do have designated inspectors for an inspector for Genentech, and they are familiar with Genentech, with their process, with their operations, so that it's much easier. There is a sense of teamwork, not just amongst city staff, but also with developers and again, their construction crew and their operational managers. So this would be the same thing here. It's just, again, reiterating what we do normally, but also focusing on prioritizing biotech projects ahead of others, because as Don mentioned and as Matt mentioned, something that has great support and is really an opportunity for Vacaville to stand out even more as a center for biotech manufacturing. So this is just the sort of poster that we created, again, to provide that comfort to folks and to just establish what our process is going to be for those folks that are interested in coming to Vacaville. So that concludes my presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions about the process. And I guess Don and Matt for the other parts.
Thank you, Mr. Bavon. And Fred, this is the item that you talked about under correspondence. It's been provided to the planning commissioners electronically and is now available to the public as part of the packet, correct?
That is correct. Thank you.
Okay. Just making sure I get all the I's dotted on the process. Commissioners, are there any of you that would like to ask questions or make comments before we invite the public to do the same on this? You see Commissioner Beaumont, the one who compared us to the research triangle, wants to jump in again. Go ahead, Doug.
Hey, this might be a stupid question, Payman, but where does the Planning Commission and or City Council approval come in on this process of 1 through 5?
So right now, most of the available parcels are located in policy plan areas. And as you know, the policy plan areas, they were created to streamline development by having them be subject to director approval. So as it stands now, these projects would be staff level unless they request any sort of development standard that isn't allowed in the policy plans, in which case it would come to the Planning Commission for review and approval. Or if it's a change to the policy plan, then it would be Planning Commission review and City Council approval.
Thank you very much.
Vice Chair Fortney.
Yes, thanks, Matt, Don, and Payman. Gentlemen, I think you hit the nail on the hammer with this policy plan. We all know what you guys do internally, but to communicate this and to see it in this format in such detail that there's such a large commitment from the council, the city, and including all departments, I think this will be the successful implementation of what happens once a future investment application comes in and you walk them through these 5 steps and they already know what to expect. So job well done, and I think you're on the right track. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Fortney. Any of the other commissioners want to comment at this point? Go ahead, Commissioner Aldridge.
I just want to say thank you for the great presentation, and this is going to be just wonderful for Vacaville. We're already on the map, of course, but this is really going to give us several shining stars. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Ken. I'm going to go ahead, since this is an action item, I'm going to open this up to see if anyone from the public wishes to make a comment or ask a question at this point. And Nancy, again, I'll ask you to help me on this. If you see anybody that shows up as someone who wishes to participate, let me know. At this point, I don't see any.
We have Alicia Minion.
Okay, Ms. Minion, go ahead.
Hi, thank you for the presentation. Definitely in support of the biomanufacturing idea, bringing businesses to Vacaville. And I had some questions on the nonprofit and how that kind of fits in the process of bringing biomanufacturing or biotech companies to the city. And I was wondering if that idea of the nonprofit, is that being modeled after another nonprofit? Is there something like it somewhere else in the country? And if so, you know, what are a couple of names of some of the nonprofits that kind of will serve the same purpose, same role? Also, I was wondering if the nonprofit was going to be a registered charity. Would it be soliciting donations? And, you know, would it be giving grants? And if it does give grants, basically the nonprofit, what would be its sources of revenue? And then there was a presentation about this, I think October 27th at City Council. I actually missed that meeting, but I started to watch it. The presentation talked about, had kind of a laundry list of roles that the nonprofit would play. One of them was investor clearinghouse. And I was wondering what that meant, and, you know, what kind of activities would be involved in the role as an investor clearinghouse. Thank you.
And staff, before you jump in on this, I know we asked for this presentation on the overall initiative. So things like the structure and the use of the nonprofit are a bit outside the normal realm of authority for the Planning Commission. So with the presentation, go ahead and answer, but let's try and make sure we stay focused within the Commission's area expertise and authority. So go ahead.
Thank you, Chairman. Matt, do you want to tag team this, or do you want me to start off with maybe role or examples?
Sure, Don, why don't you start and I'll jump in.
Okay. So Ms. Brecken, basically the role of the center, the California Biomanufacturing Center, as this nonprofit entity, is really kind of the clearinghouse for industry, the interface between industry and our city government. And they would work with us to meet with developers, because in the development community, biotechnology development is very specialized. So there's a handful of those developers out there. The nonprofit organization works with us to make contact with those developers, to also make contact with their resources to biotechnology companies that could potentially be looking for a space to relocate, grow, or expand their facilities. There's numerous things. I guess let me kind of jump ahead for a second. Examples, because Wendy, you can look this up and this will help you see kind of the menu that nonprofit organizations like this would offer in this situation. But we did model our nonprofit kind of off of the Research Triangles nonprofit organization. So very similar activities will go on. We will interface with all of our education partners from Solano Community College to UC Davis. We're nurturing a relationship right now with Berkeley to be able to also offer lower level courses at that center so we can continue to grow the workforce in Vacaville. So many, many things. And I would really be happy to sit down with you at any time and go through all of the efforts, because it's a pretty extensive effort. And I'm glad you asked the question so I can expand on that as well, because I really hope our community sees this as not just a City of Vacaville initiative or just a Solano County initiative. This is a national initiative that would really, really be able to create a workforce and an economy that can really help bring a lot of our community out of poverty and lift the income and the economy here in Vacaville. So funding, we have looked at several grant opportunities to bring some funding in. We are already looking at investor relations. We've been contacted by several investors and several developers. So we're fully underway.
That's all I was going to add, Don, was that we're actually looking at, she asked about sources of revenue, and we're looking at applying for grants as well. So we wouldn't expect to be doing much giving out of grants as much as receiving grants that are focused on workforce development. There's some possibility that we collect some corporate goodwill for student internships and that type of thing. And so there are some of those opportunities, but generally speaking, we'll be seeking a variety of types of industry funding directly and indirectly, including training.
Matt, if I can jump in there to add, we actually have already applied for a grant from the U.S. Department of Commerce, the Economic Development Agency, for some funding for this nonprofit organization. So again, we're fully underway. And I get all excited about this, so Wendy, please, if you want to grab a cup of coffee, I'd love to fill you in on all of this activity.
Great, thank you for the response. Minnie, you used up about 2 minutes of your time, but I saw your name show up. Do you have anything else you want to ask in your last minute?
Oh, no, thank you. I really appreciate it. And I might take you up on that cup of coffee. Actually, I will, but I'll reach out to you. Thank you so much.
And unfortunately, it's going to be at 6 feet distance and outside the way the world is right now. Were there any?
Yeah, well, we could always wait till the spring.
Any other members of the public who wish to participate at this point? Nancy, do you have anything?
No, we do not.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and close the public participation comment. Commissioners, it's a basic action for us to receive the report, which we've done, to adopt a statement of support for the initiative. Are there any last minute comments before we take this action? Not seeing any, I will ask per commissioner to make an action based on the staff recommendation.
Do we have words? I'll put some words out there. Do we have anything?
Well, we have 8A at the end. It says to, by simple motion, adopt a statement of support for the Biotechnology and Advanced Manufacturing Initiative.
So well spoken, I agree.
So we have a motion for Commissioner Aldridge. Should anyone wish to second it?
I'll second it, Alan Johnson.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Would the secretary call the roll, please?
Sorry about that.
There we go.
Commissioners Aldridge,
Yes.
Beaumont,
Yes.
Alan Johnson,
Aye.
Brett Johnson,
Yes.
Commissioner Lightfoot,
Yes.
Vice Chair Fortney,
Yes.
Chair McCauley.
Aye, it's a 7-0 vote in favor. So thank you for the presentation. We're now going to go to item 8B, which is the downtown specific plan review of the approved East Main Street project architecture and draft list of permitted uses. This is an information item with no action to be taken. So as typically, we do allow an opportunity for public comment. It looks like our presentation is from Tyra Hayes. So Ms. Hayes, please proceed.
Good evening, Chairman McCauley and members of the Planning Commission. As many of you may recall, last month at the October Planning Commission meeting, staff presented the draft residential and mixed-use development prototype. It was determined the residential components of downtown were necessary in order to facilitate the economic development of downtown. And in addition to that, residential units downtown would help support and enhance the amount, the variety, and the quality of other retail development downtown. So by way of quick review, next slide, please. I thought it'd be good to take just a moment to remind the Planning Commission what we reviewed last month. We reviewed the residential prototypes as they relate to multifamily dwellings within medium to high density neighborhoods in downtown. Basically, these are what we would consider small apartment buildings. Next slide, please. The second prototype relates to townhomes and row homes downtown. We would expect to see these in areas zoned for either medium or high density. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Oh, thank you. The third prototype has to do with the neighborhood multiplex. This is slightly different than a typical apartment building. In this case, this prototype is referencing large single-family residential homes that may be further subdivided into small apartment buildings. We would expect to see these types of developments be located in areas zoned for low or medium density within downtown. Next slide, please. And lastly, the fourth prototype we had reviewed was our downtown mixed-use prototype. So in this case, we would be looking at development that would incorporate both a residential component as well as a retail component. Typically, the retail component would be located on the ground floor. So after reviewing these four prototypes, the Planning Commission requested that we revisit a previously approved project within downtown. Next slide, please. So this project is known as the East Main Residential Development Project, and it was approved in late 2018. As you can see on your slide before you, we show the boundary of the downtown specific plan, and the area shown encircled in red is the approximate location of the East Main Residential Project. This project, as we're about to review, does include many of the different prototypes that we are considering for further incorporation into downtown. Next slide, please. So here we have an aerial location map showing the three sites that compose the East Main Residential Development Project. Mainly, this is located on the most eastern portion of the downtown specific plan area. We have site 1, which is located just south of East Main, north of Catherine Street. Site 2, which is located just south of Catherine Street and north of Mason Street. And finally, we have Site 3, which is located between McClellan Street as well as Depot Street. Next slide, please. So here we have another map showing the three sites we just reviewed. And this is just kind of a summary slide. Some of this information will be repeated on additional slides, so it's okay if you don't capture it all just from this one slide. But the East Main project is composed, The East Main project has been approved for 83 residential units, and it also includes the mixed-use component we just discussed, and it's located amongst 3 parcels that compose 5.26 acres. Next slide, please. So to further break down that information, Site 1, this site is, as I mentioned, located just south of East Main Street and east of Wilson Street. Sorry, just give me 1 second. So this Site 1 was approved for 1 3-story mixed-use building with street-level commercial retail uses, and it includes a total of 14 apartment units, and it would also have additional buildings to accommodate 18 for-sale condominium units. Next slide, please. Site 2 is located at the southeast corner of Wilson Street and Catherine Street. It includes 3 individual structures to accommodate 20 for-sale condominium units. Next slide, please. And lastly, we have Site 3, which is located south of Bush Street between McClellan Street and Depot Street. It includes the mixed-use component. It does include the commercial and retail uses on the ground floor. It also includes 6 individual structures to accommodate up to 31 for-sale condominium units. So I probably should go back a little bit because the question that was posed to us at the last meeting is we wanted to see what the approved architecture looked like in comparison to the residential prototype architecture we had reviewed. So with that, I'd like to take just another moment or two to re-review these last 3 slides. So if we can we please go back to the slide showing Site 1? Thank you. So as mentioned, this is the site that does include a mixed-use component right on the corner of Wilson Street and East Main Street. It has the retail component on the ground floor with apartments above. Behind this building, we do have 3 additional buildings that will accommodate additional for-sale condominium units. So you do have the architecture that was approved as part of this project also shown on this slide. So as you can see, it is a slightly larger development than what we're accustomed to downtown. But when approving this project, the architecture was taken into consideration and it was believed to be a welcome component or addition to our downtown environment.
And Tyra, this is Chair McCauley. That site looks, I think, somewhat similar to my eye to the new apartment complex at the corner of Gladys and Allison. It looks like it's just kind of the same boxing and articulation. Would you say if people are looking for a local real world example, that might be a good one to look at for seeing what this might look like?
I think that would be a good example. They do differ slightly, but in general, there are a lot of similar architectural components.
Okay.
So next slide, please. So now we are revisiting Site 2. This is a site just south of the site we just reviewed. This is the one just south of Catherine Street and north of Mason. This is the one that is comprised of 20 for-sale condominium units. So this one does have a different look to it. It is only two stories in height. And with the exception of that, it does not include the retail component, but overall, the architecture is consistent with Site 1. Next slide, please. So lastly, we come to Site 3. Site 3 is the one that's located in between McClellan Street and Bush Street. You can also envision this being located at the end of School Street, also typically known as the area where the city hosts its summer farmers market. So this site does include a mixed-use component that would be visible from where we hold our concert series during the summer, as well as where we hold the farmers market. Behind that building, we would have an additional 31 for-sale condominium units. So this architecture is slightly different than sites 1 and 2, as you can see by the slide shown before you now. This one would probably be most similar to what Vacaville has come to have known. So that is the architecture for the East Main project. I do want to stress that this is an approved project and is not being considered for further consideration as part of the downtown specific plan. The reason for bringing this back was just to provide some comparison in terms of the previously approved projects as it may correlate to the other residential and mixed-use development we are considering as part of the downtown specific plan. Next slide, please. So that concludes my presentation on the architecture as it relates to the East Main project. I should note that I was not the project planner on this. However, if there's any questions pertaining to the East Main project itself, we do have City Planner Bavand on the phone with us. He was the project planner and he may be available to answer any of your questions. It's up to the chairman if he would like to take any questions pertaining to the East Main project, or if you would like staff to continue with the second part of the presentation, which has to do with the draft permitted uses being considered for inclusion in the downtown specific plan.
At this point, I'll ask you if any of the members of the commission have questions or comments for Tyra on what we've just seen for the architecture.
Tyra, this is Commissioner Beaumont.
Go ahead, Doug.
Yeah, is this the same architecture and drawings basically that we saw in 2018? Nothing's been changed?
Hi, this is Payman again. That's correct. This is what was approved with that 2018 decision.
Great, thank you.
Any other comments? Then Tyra, go ahead and proceed with what you want to talk about for permitted uses. Wait, stop. Okay. Commissioner Lightfoot has his hand up. Go ahead.
Thank you. The last minute there. Just as a note, on the East Main portion of Site 1, one of the prescriptions is an outdoors farmers market. And just bringing that up to my fellow commissioners, that coordination with that farmers market might go into coordination with this project being built as well.
Forgive me, I'm not sure I understand the question. Perhaps for clarification, I can note that the farmers market is already in existence on School Street, which is located north of project site number 1. So the construction of the East Main project should have no bearings whatsoever on the construction of the East Main project.
So I was referencing the there was an outdoors farmers market in the downtown specific plan that was being just prescribed or talked about on East Main Street. Isn't that correct?
Okay, I understand. Albert, if we can go back to the map showing the overview of the downtown specific plan project area. Thank you. So I understand what you're asking now. As part of the downtown specific plan, we did create a feasibility study for a permanent farmers market structure. The location of that structure has yet to be determined, but we have considered locating it on the north side of East Main Street. So it would be across the street from Site 1 of East Main project. Does that help?
Yeah. Yes. I was just trying to make sure that understood that it was the same section of the street, and I think they were taking up parking spaces there, and it was proposed and as just a prescription. I just wanted to clarify that. Thank you.
Back in the day when we were in the same room, we could use the laser pointer to show what we're looking at. I look forward to that happening again someday in the future. Commissioner Lightfoot, your hand is still raised, but you're muted. If you go ahead and turn that off. And I don't see anybody else with their hand up. So Tyra, go ahead and talk about the uses.
So if I can have Albert move forward to the permitted uses, please. Okay, great, thank you. So also at last month's Planning Commission, the Commission had requested to see the draft list of permitted uses being considered for inclusion in our downtown specific plan. You do have this list within your Planning Commission packet, and perhaps we can zoom into this a little bit more and we'll just scroll through it as necessary. Oh, great, thank you. So in the version of the document you have on your screen, you can see where our draft land use development code, which has been reviewed by the Planning Commission previously, is currently being considered for further amendment as it pertains only to the downtown area. So I purposely left the track changes within this document so you can see where there may be proposed changes. Case in point, under this draft document, we are proposing to permit single unit dwellings, detached and attached, within our medium density zones within downtown. Currently, as proposed by our draft land use and development code, a single family home would be a conditional use. As we began our work on identifying permitted uses within downtown, it became a priority to permit housing by right as much as possible. So that's one of the things that we really focused on. So here you have all the other land uses as well, and you'll see that as it pertains to residential uses, we are proposing to change some of the uses that are currently being proposed as conditional uses. That means they're subject to additional review, usually by the Planning Commission, changing that review to a permitted use. Now, we've yet to decide how that would look. We don't know whether or not we would permit all residential uses subject to review by the Community Development Director, Would it be subject to approval by the Planning Commission? We don't know. That's the next step in this process. So I really want to emphasize everything that we're looking at tonight is in its draft form. And if the planning commissioners see anything on this page that causes any concern or warrants any additional discussion, I definitely do recommend that and welcome it. Because as I mentioned, once we get done with this phase, we are going to be moving into the entitlement phase and identifying how each of these uses will be reviewed in the future. So rather than walk through the entire list here, because it is quite lengthy, I'm curious if the planning commissioners had time to review this list within their packet, and if anyone has any questions or concerns that they would like to discuss further.
Any of the commissioners wish to bring any of those questions or concerns up right now?
Would the planning commission like that I go through the whole list?
The chair doesn't, and I don't see any of the other commissioners chiming in saying they would like the entire list reviewed. Tyra, I think this was an evening where we were looking a lot more, at least I was looking a lot more at the architecture and the appearance based on what we had talked about last month. And so the list of uses didn't get as much attention from me as the appearance. So that's just where I am on this. Commissioner Aldridge is nodding her head in a similar manner on that.
Yes.
She even said yes, even if you didn't pick it up.
Very good.
Anybody else want to chime in? We'll give the public an opportunity to do so then. Do we, Nancy, see any members of the public who wish to participate in this discussion?
We have Alicia Minion.
Okay, go ahead and open up the chance for Ms. Minion to participate.
Hi, Alicia Minion. Hey, just a quick question. The slide that shows the conditional use permit next to single family dwelling, I was just wondering if the conditional use permit is no longer needed or necessary. I was just curious, why was it in place and originally? I mean, what was the reason that a conditional use permit was required for a single family dwelling? So by taking that restriction away, making it a permitted use, well, I'm just curious, what are we allowing? What was, because generally, if there was a conditional use permit required for the single unit dwelling in a particular zoned area, there must have been a reason for that. And I'm just curious what that was.
Okay, that's a good question. Thank you. So just to make sure everyone understands what's currently occurring, at the same time that we're working on our downtown specific plan, we're also working on a comprehensive update to our land use and development code, also known as our zoning code. What you see before you is a matrix that comes out of our draft zoning code, and it pertains to the existing zoning that applies to our downtown area today. As part of our downtown specific plan, we are proposing to change the zoning. So I can see there could be a little confusion regarding the two different documents and how we are treating the different zoning districts. Under our current zoning for downtown, we really wanted to emphasize just higher density residential development. And for the most part, that is still true today. As you may be aware, there is a mandate from the state that we provide additional housing to address California's housing crisis. However, that said, we want to identify that we do have unique situations downtown that are and will likely remain zoned for low density housing. Those areas are located along the periphery of our project area. And a lot of these parcels are not likely to be able to support high density housing just based on their size alone. So based on that, we didn't want to penalize the development of those kind of remainder lots in those low low density zoned areas. And we just want to make the entire entitlement process easier. So the one way we can do that is to do away with the conditional use permit procedure and just allow them to be permitted. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I mean, I think that helps, but I just always thought conditional use permits are just sort of, it's an opportunity to get, you know, a commission or council to review the particular facts and circumstances, to ensure that, you know, if to allow a conditional use permit, it's not going to be a project that maybe doesn't conform with the area or doesn't have some kind of negative impact. So it's like an additional internal control. So if that's omitted, I mean, I'm just wondering what's the risk? I mean, I can understand why you want to provide some kind of expediency and efficiency to the process, but I just was wondering what's the risk of kind of losing that kind of additional check and balance to ensure that whatever the conditions of that conditional use permit was comprised of is, but by not having that check and balance, what's kind of the worst case scenario that could happen? And this is, I'm sure, a cost benefit kind of issue. You know, it's a cost benefit issue. But anyway, I don't know the world of scenarios in the conditional use permit universe. So I'm just curious, do you see any particular risk by not allowing them anymore?
So Tyra, let me ask you a couple of specific questions to help follow up on that. So if this doesn't require a conditional use permit, but it still requires a design review permit, is that correct?
It will require some kind of review. You are correct.
So there's still a public notice the same distance, or is it smaller for design review versus conditional use permit?
We have yet to determine that. That's the next phase of this task.
So the notice requirements might be different depending upon what the use is. If you were looking at a single family home under kind of a staff design review versus a planning commission conditional use permit, what are the differences in the findings that would have to be made for a project to be approved?
Oh, goodness. I'm not sure if I can really answer that. First, I'd like to go back to Ms. Minion just to let her know that her understanding of a conditional use permit is correct and that is applicable in a large portion of the city and will remain so. If it weren't for the fact that we are carefully rezoning downtown, we would probably continue to use the conditional use permit. But as we go through the rezoning of downtown, we are only going to apply the single family residential zoning to areas in which we do not foresee any issues building additional single family homes. So we're trying to be very proactive in our review to try to identify whether or not the construction of any single family homes within a specific area would potentially increase any issues within the neighborhood. So rather than...
It sounds like when this comes back to us for a formal consideration, one of the things we would like to see addressed, because it's been brought up by the public, is whether moving from a conditional to a permitted use, you know, how that would affect the approval process and whether it increases the chances of undesirable uses or appearances coming into the downtown area. Again, this is an information item, so we want to hear what the public is interested in, but we don't necessarily have all the answers worked out.
Correct.
I could maybe perhaps add a little bit to this regarding the findings. So right now, our
is this Mr. Brown?
I'm sorry, this is Pam Van, city planner. Right now, our draft code update is not looking at modifying the findings that are required for design review or conditional use permit. So any entitlement approval would require findings to be made. Generally, findings that are similar amongst the different applications are ones that address compliance with general plan, or zoning ordinance, or any other applicable zoning document. But also sort of land use compatibility is another one that's within the larger findings that are made to comply with the general plan and zoning ordinance. So we're not anticipating that the findings are going to change. The findings will most likely remain the same. But whether one requires a design review or conditional use permit, there still are findings that have to be made. Findings have to be made for really every action that the city takes as a land use approval.
Thank you. Ms. Minion, you got about a minute left on your time if you have any follow-up.
Oh, hi. I didn't have any more follow-up. Thank you so much.
Are there any other members of the public, Nancy, that are raising their hands to participate?
No, not at this time.
Okay, then I'll go ahead and close the public comment portion and ask if, again, there's no action on this, ask if there's any concluding comments or questions from any of the planning commissioners. If so, now's the time to raise your blue hand on the screen. We've been at this for a while. I don't see anybody else raising their hand, so Kyra, I think you've gotten the comments that you're going to get from us this evening on this particular item, and we know that the uses will come back later. Thank you all for sticking with us through the first 8 items. We have some reports, including item number 9, which is status report on development and major projects, starting with current planning. Staff, go ahead.
Good evening, Chair and members of the Planning Commission.
I can barely hear you.
You can barely hear me?
I can hear you now.
Okay, excellent. Is it getting better?
Yes.
Sorry about that. Good evening, Chair and members of the Planning Commission. This is Albert Enolt. I'll be providing you a status update about current planning development for the month of October.
But hold on, at least one other commissioner is saying they still can't hear you.
Oh no, just one moment. Is that better?
Yes. A bit.
A little bit?
A little bit.
Sorry about that. So in October, we received several development applications for consideration. The first being the Allison Apartments. That is a planned development density bonus and tentative parcel map request to construct 167 units that would be in a 6-story building. It's for affordable housing on a 1.71 acre site that's located on Allison Drive, abutting the city's intermodal transit station. Another project that we received is the Village, which is zoning map amendment, policy plan amendment, and plan development request to construct 22 townhomes on a 1.47 acre site on Butcher Road. It's across the street from Guns Fishing and other stuff. That project includes 1 4-story building, 2 3-story buildings, and some garages and covered parking spaces. We also received a design review application to perform several exterior changes at the Alamo Plaza. This project is called the Ranch. The Alamo Plaza is at 806 through 904 Alamo Drive, and what they're looking at doing is changing a lot of the parking areas and some of the landscape areas to make it more walkable and friendlier for outdoor dining. We also received a modification request to revise the master plan for Owl Patch Park. What they're looking at doing is removing and replacing a softball field and relocating a child's outdoor play area and constructing a new skate park and some basketball courts. We received a couple of time extensions for the Nut Tree Apartments and for the Pony Express Senior Housing, but we did some additional research and found that the state passed an assembly bill that granted automatic time extensions for those 2 projects. So depending on their dates when they were approved, they'd be looking at getting automatic extension of 18 months for 2022 is when they'd be looking at having their next approval expire. We also received a couple of smaller projects, an administrative clearance request for a rear yard reduction, and then also we're helping the Public Works Department and their capital improvement program in performing an environmental review for the interchange corridor at I-505 and Vacaville Parkway. In October, we approved, or the Director of Community Development approved the Roberts Ranch Village B house plans. That consists of 3 house plans on 51 lots in Village B of Roberts Ranch subdivision. They're all single-story models, all 3 of the plans, that is. They're ranging in floor area from 1,800 square feet to 2,200 square feet, and the exterior elevations consist of Spanish, farmhouse, and craftsman design themes. And then during October, we also approved a couple of other administrative clearance requests to reduce rear yard setbacks. During October, we're still processing home occupation permits. We received 11 and 19 were approved. And we processed, planning reviewed 122 building permit applications for projects such as the Hyatt House Hotel, Farmstead plot plans, and Home to Suites Hotel. And then during October, we also helped with 129 development-related inquiries. That's it for current planning. I'm here to answer any questions.
Questions for Albert? Seeing none, let's go on to advanced planning. Looks like we have Ms. Hayes back.
Hello again. So for advanced planning, you are quite aware of what we're currently working on as it relates to the downtown specific plan. However, I'd like to note that we are also currently working on doing the economic feasibility study for the residential prototypes we just reviewed. We're also starting work on creating the development and design requirements for the downtown specific plan. So in addition to the downtown specific plan, we continue to work on the Green Free project. So staff is still working with utility consultants to create the technical reports necessary to begin work on the environmental impact report necessary for the project. Staff is also working with our transportation engineer to address the thresholds necessary to address vehicular miles traveled as required by CEQA law. It is believed that, well, let me back up. I should let the Planning Commission know that we will be holding a special Planning Commission on January 5th to review the proposed thresholds and policies that we are considering as it relates to vehicular miles traveled. At that same meeting, we're going to be discussing additional policies being considered for the update to our energy conservation and action strategy. For those of you who have been on the commission for a while, you may remember the ECAS document being adopted as part of our general plan update. We are required to update that every 5 years. And given the fact that both the vehicular miles traveled thresholds as well as the ECAS address the reduction of greenhouse gases, we thought it would be most efficient to do them together because both of them will be evaluated by a supplemental environmental impact report. If we can remain on schedule, we are hoping to have both documents adopted by the end of April of next year. In addition to that, we continue to prepare for our comprehensive housing element update, which we anticipate beginning early next year. As of late this afternoon, we did receive the financial agreement from the California Department of Housing and Community Development for our latest grant. This grant is known as the Local Early Action Plan Grant, or LEAP for short. This is a $300,000 grant that the city was awarded earlier this year. And this money will be used to fund the in-house preparation of the housing element update, as well as preparing and amending other housing-related documents. Those are our largest projects, but another project that would be of interest to the Planning Commission is just recently the advanced planning staff was working with our Parks and Recreation staff to apply for the Urban Greening Grant. We were hoping to receive the Urban Greening Grant to do additional improvements along the Rocky Hill Trail. It recently came to our attention that the state chose not to consider the Rocky Hill Trail improvements for further consideration. However, they are considering additional improvements to the Trower Park located within the Rocky Markham Hill area of town. So that is mainly what our advanced planning staff are currently working on.
And Tyra, I note that there was a meeting tonight on the Markham Rocky Hill area. Unfortunately, it was scheduled at the same time as the Planning Commission, which made it impossible for us to participate in both of them. In the future, if those meetings can be on different evenings, it'd give us a chance more to participate in those neighborhood meetings as well as these important ones.
I will make note of that and I will refer that to the appropriate people. Thank you very much.
We'll also comment that there's some back and forth chatter from staff on the chat that's showing up on my screen here. So just so you're aware, when you're typing, the rest of us are seeing. Mr. Salazar, it looks like your PowerPoint is probably up. And why don't you go ahead and make your presentation?
Thank you, Chair and the Commissioners. This is the Building Division Update Report for the month of October. In October, Building Division completed 1,252 inspections. As you can see from the chart, very similar to last year. Fewer this October, but there were more in September. So it's all about the same inspection activity as last year during the same quarter. We issued 35 single-family residential homes received final inspection approval in October. Well, basically one a day during that time period. The 1,252 inspections, 321 were completed by Vacaville, 629 were completed by Tim. Greg completed 283 inspections and then also completed 125 plan reviews. I was filling in for a couple days, so I completed 34 inspections. Our building permit applications, which is something that gives us a little foreshadowing as to what our activity will be in inspections in the future, were about the same this October as they were last October. But overall, we're still running about the same number of building permit applications overall as we did in 2019 during the same quarter. Our October permits issued, 452 permits were issued, and they were processed by 3 permit processing staff as well as our online permitting system. As you can see, in October, we almost nearly matched exactly October of 2019. So we're running, again, about the same pace as we were last year and the same activity as last quarter of last year. Kristen Botello processed to issuance 27 single-family dwelling units in October. So those are dwelling units that are now currently being built. 69% of all of our permits issued on October were issued online. And then Debbie Fowler and Rebecca Diaz, our 2 permit processing technicians, process 113 permits and maintain a system to process permits remotely using emails and our existing permit software such that applicants did not need to make a trip to the city hall for any reason whatsoever. But we're still not getting a lot of people taking advantage of that system, but it is available. And the last slide is to kind of indicate how well we're doing with respect to our ECAS goals. As you can see, we issued more solar permits this October in 2020 than we did last year in 2019. What's unique about this October number is that a number of the permits that we issued were simultaneously issued with new house construction because the state now requires new single-family dwelling units to automatically have solar built on them. But what we've done in the building department is separate those out, not as separate permits, but as separate data points so that we can keep track of how many solar permits we're issuing per single-family dwelling unit, whether it's existing or new. So we're still making progress on our ECAS goals. And that's all I have for the October update. If you have any questions, please feel free.
This is Chair Commissioner Beaumont. Just wondered if the October number included the Travis Credit Union solar panels that are being put up in the parking lot?
I do not know if that permit was, if that was one of the almost 200 permits that we issued in October. It may have been. I do know we processed a permit, but I don't know if it went to October's number or if it went to November's numbers.
Thank you.
Any other questions for any of the three staff presenters? Don't see any coming up, which means we will now move to item number 10, the director's reports or council actions and future schedule. One of those future items we've already heard for a special meeting on January 5th. So, Mr. Baderi, I shouldn't steal your thunder. I should let you go ahead.
Okay, shortened my presentation there. No. So,
that's a good thing.
With regard to city council actions, in late October, the council's last meeting in October, they did approve work on the grant applications that Tyra mentioned earlier. So both Saul Uribe and Maya Amichai in the planning division are working on those park grants with the park staff and the housing staff. The council also approved funding for a permit and project management software system for planning and building. This would be a system that helps people obtain information on zoning and development review processes and permit assistance. So that should begin to go into effect sometime next year, but it sounds like a good system and we're looking forward to that. Should help people in obtaining information online, as Jay was describing. On November 10th, the City Council did have a very excellent presentation facilitated by Don Burris and Dr. Robert Eiler from Sonoma State University, just describing the economic recovery strategy that the city is beginning to prepare. And even though it doesn't directly relate to items coming to the Planning Commission, I thought I'd just point it out to if you didn't see the presentation by Dr. Eiler. Very fascinating discussion on the current economic climate and where things seem to be going. I couldn't begin to summarize it for you, but definitely worth a watch if you have time. And then finally, not city council related, but last week, Payman and myself did present the code update to the Airport Land Use Commission to give them a start at reviewing the draft code. They are required to review any code amendments in any of the cities in Solano County with regard to compatibility with airport land use restrictions. So they're reviewing the code update now, and we hope to return to them soon to get a final determination on consistency. And then with regard to Planning Commission, the December Planning Commission meeting, we will likely have another update for you regarding the downtown specific plan work. So there may be additional information we're ready to present to you then, and we're trying to bring this to you in pieces so that you don't receive the final draft plan all at once, but you've had a chance to see these drafts as they are taking shape. We may have a housing project for you. This is the Harbison Drive apartment project, previously approved by the Planning Commission. The developer is looking at making some changes to the format and layout of the project design. So this is just behind the city's transit center that fronts on Allison Parkway, and the project itself fronts on Harbison Drive. So at this point, that's what's shaping up on that agenda. And then, of course, as Tyra mentioned earlier, the item for your January 5th special meeting, the vehicle miles traveled and energy and conservation action strategy update draft strategies. And that is it.
Thank you. Questions for Mr. Baderi on council actions or on our schedule? See none, we get to go to item number 11, which is commission comments. Any of the commissioners, Commissioner Aldridge, go ahead.
I have a question. People have been asking me and I have no answers, so maybe somebody can help me tonight. People are asking when Vacaville might get 5G.
Ooh. I'm sorry, I don't have an update for you on that. Any of the other staff, can you help me with that?
I can touch upon it a little bit. It's really hard to say when we'll get it because it's really dependent on when the carriers are going to install the 5G infrastructure. However, I can tell you that we've had at least 2 recent inquiries from wireless carriers wanting to locate new 5G technology within the public right-of-way. That's to say they would like to install their antennas on the city streetlights. So my guess is very soon.
And didn't we, a number of years ago, have a session where we talked about putting them on the city streetlights?
Yes, we did. I had that conversation with you.
Yeah, I remember. It was quite a few years ago.
It is permitted by federal law. We cannot prohibit that.
Right, right. So very soon. Maybe.
Very soon.
Okay, thank you.
Any other commissioners have questions or comments they'd like to make? I'm looking for anything to show up on this small screen that I have, and none are showing up. So my final comment was, thank you all for putting up with the meeting for tonight. It was closing in on 3 hours. I hope everybody has a very good Thanksgiving, no matter how many people you have around for it. A bit more than a week from now. Stay safe, and we are adjourned. Good night, Vacaville.